Mombasa streets, filled with brutes, beacons, and firefights to keep players' minds occupied. A poster blended into the city's setting that simply reads, "Destiny awaits." Hidden in plain sight for years, Bungie would begin their next world-sweeping franchise. Bungie would push to finish their last Halo game and reach into the best minds they could find to figure out Destiny. This would lead to the 343 days of Halo into 4, and for Bungie, this meant the work of a sci-fi fantasy world. Over the coming years from 2009 to Destiny's eventual release, the identity of the game was changed so many times that nobody knew what was to come. In a Polygon article written by Michael McWhorter, Christopher Barrett and Joseph Staten both described the world and characters of Destiny with a focus on fantasy.
One of the first versions of Destiny that we explored was a fantasy world. And what was appealing about that was the history, the myths, and the legends. And it was a really nice change of pace after Halo.
There were giant toads, white tigers, a whole race you could play as called Tiger, Rasputin the Exo, kidnapped and taken to a faraway place called the Dreadnought, Crow the wildling beyond the walls of the city, sheltering you, the player, like brethren. The speaker sent you out on a journey. The Traveler of Light has a dark secret. All ideas for Destiny's universe.
We've gone from continuing to make Halo games to doing something which certainly draws on our past experiences and plays to our strengths, but it's new and exciting. It's going to take on a life of its own.
We didn't even know how big Halo was going to get. How can anything be bigger than Halo? We'll find out.
Internal fighting between producers, directors, and staff all alike. Lawsuits entering the early stages over the harassment and disbowelment of a once magical idea. Beneath the surface of the world of Destiny, whatever it was going to be, was a workplace filled with crunch. As we would come to find years later, there was an explosion of frustration at Bungie.
Let's build a world where we can tell any great story we want, a place millions of people will want to visit again and again for the next 10 years and more. Pretty lofty goal.
But we really did want to build a world that mattered. But we also wanted to build a world that was really, really flexible, where we could accommodate any crazy idea that we dreamed up or anybody else on the team too. That sounds like madness, right? We'd never even attempted to build something like this before. We had no idea really how we'd achieve this goal.
For reasons unknown, the lead writer, Joseph Staten, left Bungie in 2013. His story would never fully come to fruition. In fact, unconfirmed reports suggest that his in-game narrative was reduced to grimoire cards on a third-party website. The evidence fans would gather include doses of E3's trailer painting characters like we would never see them, a whole plot involving the Traveler's not-so-golden age intentions, the Speaker's hidden evil, and more. According to Jason Schreier of then Kotaku, Staten had presented a 2-hour supercut of the game's cutscenes and story beats to studio leadership. To quote Schreier, in the summer of 2013, just over a year before Destiny came out, the story got a full reboot. Bungie ditched everything Staten and his team had written, reworking Destiny's entire structure as they scrapped the plot threads, overhauled characters, and rewrote most of the dialogue. The decision was made against Staten's wishes, sources say. Destiny project lead Jason Jones and the rest of senior leadership were unhappy with the writing team's supercut, and their reaction was to just scrap it all. This news shocked fans, since Staten was the lead writer of Halo's world. The pointing went around and fan theories only grew. The blame was then pushed to Activision, since this wasn't what Bungie was like before Destiny's 10-year plan at the hands of the giant publisher. And we never will truly know who's at fault. But the IGN article from years later does point to the writing team specifically having the brunt of some awful issues. Nothing was and will be a crystal clean capturing of what went on in this stage, but another blow was soon to take place. Marty O'Donnell, one of Bungie's co-founders and lead composers, was fired without reason and without a cause. After delivering Music of the Spheres with the help of Michael Salvatore and Sir Paul McCartney, he was terminated. We do know a lot about the firing of O'Donnell from the lawsuit he would file against Bungie. From the documents, it appears that Music of the Spheres was the nail in the coffin. Proud of his work, O'Donnell wanted to release the soundtrack as a standalone album, and became increasingly frustrated when he saw a lack of enthusiasm and cooperation by both Bungie and Activision to do so. To compound that frustration, Activision decided at the last moment, and apparently without the composer's consent, to replace extracts from Music of the Spheres in the 2013 E3 trailer for Destiny, using music sourced by Activision instead. Deeply unhappy with that decision, O'Donnell felt that the publisher had overstepped its proper role by assuming artistic control of the trailer music. O'Donnell would go on to try to prevent the trailer from coming out without his composed tracks. O'Donnell was contracted to finish the original soundtrack of Destiny, then was fired, eventually winning the lawsuit over Bungie and Activision for Music of the Spheres. It all just felt like a very bad breakup over the creative struggles of a new universe. And with the new management promising an insanely high budget, it meant a lot was about to change creatively. With all the stresses, the battles, the community making up a new story, and reviewers getting ready to flame Destiny, you may think the game was bound to be atrocious at launch. Well, inside the tainted walls is a lot to be discovered. Look guys, we've gone through so many gaming community stories over my channel's run, and over the past year, but I feel like you guys have never got a say in what video is next. We've gone through lawsuits, mysterious doors, Elden Ring champions, and even most recently, some Call of Duty zombies. Don't think I forgot about Black Ops. You guys give me the ability to do this every single day. So for this month and for this video, the top comment on what topic is next doesn't even have to be Destiny, can be another game or Destiny, it's up to you. Doesn't even have to be serious or make it as serious as you want to. That top comment will get a video focused around that topic. Without you guys, I'm not able to do literally any of this. So you should get a say in what's next. Your move, Chads and Chadettes.
See that? Right behind me, that blue right there? That is Destiny Alpha. First look. Boom! Oh!
Destiny's Alpha was released in tandem with Battlefield Hardline's beta on June 12th to June 15th of 2014. In this, we see the first location, the Cosmodrome, and we hear the voice of Peter Dinklage as the Ghost.
Okay, the Skywatch is just on the other side of the steps. And it's surrounded by Fallen. Well, I'm ready if you are.
This was the Dark Within mission, exploring the Cosmodrome and meeting the Hive. This alpha would feature exploration of this place, the tower to visit all the new NPCs, and the Crucible to use your best guns against other Guardians. Destiny's selling pitch was always the idea of the Crucible, being the first FPS game where you could take the best loot from beating bosses and bring that into the game against other people. It was Halo, it was COD, it was a fantasy world, it was an MMO, it was everything incarnate. The beta came out a month later, on my birthday, of July 17th, 2014. The immediate changes from the alpha to the beta were in the UI, as it seems some differences were made and the names of some of the guns were changed too, like the closing time now turned into the patience and time. The end mission screen was also changed too, looking more like what players would see in the final product. This was released with the ability to do everything on the Earth's Cosmodrome, including the Strike, the Devil's Lair. This also included more Crucible maps, and on the very last day of the beta, for only a couple of hours, a visit to the moon to explore around the location. The beta of Destiny was received with mixed reviews. A lot of people weren't sure what they were playing since most of Bungie's audience were players that came from Halo, so all of the comparisons started there. While Destiny's ability and skill trees were something a bit closer to Mass Effect, players noticed that the missions were, at first, something cool, an appetizer of sorts for what the main course of these missions would be in the main game. The positives were found in the level progression. It felt incredibly satisfying gaining new abilities, exploring new crevices of the Cosmodrome, and taking out the bigger bosses within. This, paired with the new weapons from enemy-dropped engrams, created an exciting loot chase that Halo players weren't used to. Others weren't as satisfied with the idea of a random rolled gun, instead pointing to the lack of excitement by not guaranteeing something grand from the ground. Either way, time set in and Destiny would release some trailers to push the final product to the masses.
Guardian? Eyes up, Guardian. It worked. You're alive.
Destiny 1 released on September 9th of 2014. While I won't go into detail of every mission, a brief overview of the vanilla story is in order. Destiny started off in the Cosmodrome and with the revival of the player's Guardian. The setting was eerie and mysterious, with the Fallen being introduced via shadows, lighting, laser traps. As the player progressed, they got the first weapon and traversed through a horror-like setting, killing all the Fallen in their path. A ship flies in and the player is presented with one of the only environment-changing set pieces they will ever see, and a Fallen ship that is, to my knowledge, never seen again. You get back to your ship, unbolt it, a Fallen captain comes out of a hole in the wall, and a strange character looks after you in the distance. Over the next missions, the player is tasked with finding their way to the other planets and to stop the darkness. The mission structure for all of these levels involve defend the area, destroy objects, destroy waves of enemies, and the occasional mini-boss that also appears as normal enemies you've already fought, but with a larger health bar. No new moves to be found. There's only a few times where Destiny spices up this formula, and it's safe to say the game was focused on showing off environments and enemies more than a story. Most of the story is told through your Ghost exposition, but it also assumes you're familiar with the world of Destiny before you really step in. Instead of learning about each enemy race, you're gaining Grimoire cards that tell you to go to another website to find more information on what you just fought and the story of where you are. You know that there's the imminent threat of darkness you will need to learn to defeat, shown to the player in the opening cutscene, and that there's some characters in the tower to help you along your journey to defeat it. You're told some sparse details about the Traveler through its representative, a character called the Speaker. It's through this dialogue that we are told why we've been brought back to life, to protect humanity's last city from any and all threats of darkness. And if you wanted to know anything more about this mysterious Traveler, well, there isn't much to be told.
Lately, those tales have stopped. Now, the children are frightened anyway.
We learn the overarching darkness, but we never get a face to represent it. We learn that the Warmind Rasputin is alive on Earth. We defend and try to reboot it, then head to the moon to find the last remaining Guardian out there. Back on Earth, we were introduced to the Hive, but we learned that they came from the moon. At least these ones did. Slowly, the player begins to associate Destiny's alien races with certain planets and moons in the solar system. The strange figure appears here again, and by the end of your time on the moon, you just become more familiar with places you will visit again one day. With a head full of new questions, this exo-stranger points the player to Venus for the answers they seek. One portion of Destiny's story that I think doesn't get enough credit is establishing stakes for what you will fight one day. There's locations like the Hellmouth, stories of Hive climbing out of its pits to wreak havoc on the surface of the moon and beyond. and mysterious references to hive gods like the Temple of Crota and the Shrine of Oryx, painting the idea of, I want to go there and I want to fight those gods. Destiny's environmental storytelling doesn't get enough credit on launch due to the narrative being a loaded sampler of locations and a shallow, linear path. On Venus, the Guardian learns of another race, the Vex. The Vex are a sophisticated and highly intelligent machine race, and the final villain of the vanilla campaign. While being overrun by the spawning waves of Vex enemies, our friend the Exo Stranger saves the day, and tells the player,
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain.
Destiny's most infamous line of ridicule. By the end of exploring Venus, she takes you to meet the Queen of the Awoken, Mara Sov, on the Reef. The Reef is a collective of space trash and asteroids. Again, no real information is given. You're just to assume that Mara Sov and her brother, Aldrin Sov, are important characters, and somehow they have the loyalty of a select group of Fallen. You're tasked with exploring the archive on Venus for more information on the Vex, where again, credit to the environmental storytelling, you hear about a place called the Vault of Glass.
Mappings of a Vex underworld, a place they called the Vault of Glass.
You then get an eye of a Gate Lord, and are told about the heart of the Vex's darkness, the Black Garden, and the way to access this? Mars. As your ship touches the vast deserts of Mars, it's a direct opposite to Venus. Instead of an abandoned city, it's a desolate wasteland. And instead of robots, it's the warmongering, rhino-like race known as the Cabal. Your mission is, once again, to seek answers. Then destroy the heart of the Black Garden. You open a door, then are led into another beautiful location, have a battle with some statues turned Praetorian, and the giant piece of five gum in the sky explodes. At the end of Destiny, the Stranger gives you her weapon named the Stranger's Rifle. And that's it. The end.
That's it? What the f-
I'm sure you can see why Destiny was flamed for having this sort of sample platter style. And with the context of what players would find out a year later, the changed story of Joseph Staten, it's easy to see why it receives so much hate. But just like everything else we have said so far, and will continue to say, there was magic buried within. For every no time to explain, there was a cave dripping with atmosphere. For every defend area mission, there was a place that looked unique, but wasn't accessible, inches away. Let's talk about that last one for a moment, because anyone who played Vanilla D1 would know that every single planet had something that was just locked away, but looked ready to access. This was another part of rearranging the story of Destiny from its original vision, instead placing those stories into DLC for time to come. Hell, the Vex weren't even supposed to be the main villain of the original story, as evidenced by a leaked roadmap showing the Vex a part of a DLC in years to come. Fully finished areas that players were accessing, like Rasputin's bunker, which would release in the first DLC, and that Citadel area accessed in the House of Wolves. For another criticism players had with the game comes the fact that the campaign was incredibly short, running about 6 to 8 hours. Strikes were also separate stories from the campaign. Think of them like short stories not related to the main game's story, which I actually ended up really appreciating for the world building purposes. But fans, they just weren't happy about it. That's something else too, and why I believe so many hated vanilla Destiny. It wasn't trying to be Halo or Call of Duty. It was trying to tap into a lot of spaces while having its own world building identity. And it did have behind the scenes issues, a lot of them, but it more than made up for them in some key areas. So let's talk about those key areas and why I believe Destiny was a masterpiece hidden beneath all this gunk.
These guardians show us what we are, what we have always been, and what we will be again.
In the beginning, there was nothing but hatred. In fact, there was a huge amount of people that weren't sold on the premise of Destiny. But if you had a couple of friends and you weren't paying attention to all of the background scenes of Bungie's creation of Destiny, you'd find a pretty fun game. The gunplay was like nothing a first-person shooter was presenting at the time, having a more forgiving headshot hitbox than what normally looks to be. Also, the variety of weapons and the chase for more weapons felt tremendous. Remember, the gunplay was so good that chasing tiered loot for more perks on the guns felt better. Destiny wasn't just another loot-driven game with abilities first and weapons that were just supplemental stats with bigger numbers depending on what you used. It was instead a chase to perfect a weapon through random drops. I love the idea of random drops as it kept me chasing something in the game, just as I love the community that came to form the Loot Cave stories, Evil Master Rahul, and Randall the Vandal. Destiny became a PvE sandbox of strikes and missions to hopefully one day get the rumored exotic weapons and hit the max level of 30. This sandbox also allowed for PvP roles of weapons to be earned, and it was just all new for a first-person shooter to feel this good and have this chase tied to it, reminiscent of earning camos in Call of Duty and ranks in Halo. But this time, having a weapon someone else didn't have gave you that leg up to put up kills in the Crucible. Exotic weapons are something we mentioned and have a whole plethora of videos discussing on this channel, but these weapons were incredible on release, and to this day really, since they weren't just thrown together and looked like legendaries. Guns like the Last Word, Thorn, the Gallahorn, the Icebreaker, all had stories that went with the weapon, and just by wielding them, it enticed players to ask questions about the world of Destiny. This is where the vision of that universe I could see Christopher Barrett and Joseph Staten talking about was coming to fruition, and it didn't need a linear story in front of players for them to still find the merit of the game. Exotics would be a nice piece to add to the experience, but they also came with some quality of life annoyances. For one, exotics could drop from engrams, but Rahul was inconsistent, and for two, leveling up a weapon required planetary materials. That sounds fine, except you couldn't buy them from a vendor. Instead, you had to run laps around different places to grab materials off the ground. Leveling weapons and armor that weren't exotics was hit or miss too, since some weren't able to be used in the endgame since the max level didn't scale past 26. This is something I actually liked, but I know not a lot of players did. I liked that vanilla Destiny wasn't backing down from establishing an endgame separate from the main game, and that some weapons and armor just weren't going to make the final level cut. Armor and weapons also worked on needing materials from the endgame to level up, Ascendant Shards and Ascendant Energy respectfully, but the places to earn them were few and far between. The Queen's Wrath, which only appeared one time ever in Destiny's history, was the best way to earn these materials through heroic missions. Nightfalls were harder strikes that were so hard on launch, players found cheese spots to sit in corners and shoot bosses. The final place, the infamous 11-hour world's first Vault of Glass. The rumors around this raid were everywhere, and it's hard to find a good quality trailer of what VOG was about, but it spread around the internet that it was the reason to play Destiny after the rest of the game's runtime outside of PvP. The Vault of Glass had loot for normal mode that included armor that could get you to level 30 if you maxed out the levels, and weapons that could do the same. In fact, the best weapons and armor in the game were all inside of the vault, but the challenge was like nothing else in the game, and required 6 players to work together to defeat some seriously unique bosses that had mechanics for that loot. VOG would be the best place for all the loot, and for all of the leveling, but the Forever 29 stayed true. The Forever 29 climb was the fact that you could just somehow not get all the loot to hit level 30, since it was rare to see the loot from the raid, and that's because sometimes, instead of loot, you'd just get materials. Raid loot had static rolls, meaning you'd get something set in stone like an exotic, but it was legendary, so Bungie made them super rare. You can even hear some of the best reactions from players getting the loot from this raid too. Here, have a listen. Oh, I got it! I got it! Ah, yes! Yes!
Oh, I need to watch this on stream.
Yes!
Even I got one of
Oh my
these.
god! I was looking away from it. Oh my god!
Please, please. Yes! Yes! Oh my god!
Yeah, I'm impressed by that. Hey, second
I got the facts! I got it! I got it! Yes! Yes! Yes!
Yes! Yes!
Yes! Yes! Yes! Woohoo!
The chase, the climb, the separation of endgame from the main game, activities that helped you acquire more weapons, weapons that felt incredible to wield, in a world that felt like it was only beginning to unravel. Yeah, this was magic. Destiny has never been a perfect game. It has never been the complete package it was supposed to be. Business and inside fighting, lawsuits, betrayal of character, and loss of identity all held back what was supposed to be this miraculous game. Beneath all of the problems Destiny had, though, nothing saved the game like the magic those original ideas created, and the community that sprouted from those ideas. It may be hard to see nowadays why so many people were addicted to the very shallow story with the game coming first, and I guess the same can be said nowadays with the direct opposition. Players flocking for a game first when the story has replaced every aspect of that once game. Nobody will ever win. It is the nature of Destiny, a paracausality that you just have to be a part of to understand. I hate Destiny, it's my favorite game. And it all started here. The best senior year of high school I ever spent. You'll be missed. Have a nice day.